The largest air force in the world is the U.S. Air Force. The second largest is the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. Combined, they operate more aircraft than any other country's entire military. It didn't happen by accident. And it's not just some Pentagon vanity metric. The Navy and Marines fly because their survival depends on it. The scale, variety, and autonomy of their aviation arms have evolved into something most nations would call a whole military. The United States essentially built multiple air forces, all different, all heavily armed, all very much still flying. Let's get into how that happened, why it stayed that way, and what it means when a single country's naval aviation wing outnumbers the air fleets of Russia, China, and everyone else not named America. In 1948, following World War II, a bunch of generals went to a beach to decide who got to blow what up and from which altitudes. The result was the Key West Agreement, a document that looked like a division of labor but functioned more like a Cold War prenup. It gave the newly created U.S. Air Force the lead on strategic air power, long-range bombing, and control of the nuclear football. The Navy could keep its carriers and fly aircraft in support of naval operations. The Marine Corps retained its own organic aviation for direct support of ground forces. And the Army, well, it got helicopters, eventually. Everyone smiled for the photo, went home, and immediately started building their own shadow empires of steel and jet fuel. The lines drawn in Key West were broad enough to park a couple C-17s. The Navy especially wasn't about to rely on another branch for air cover in the middle of the ocean. They'd learned that lesson the hard way during the Guadalcanal campaign in 1942, when Marine pilots flying F-4F Wildcats from Henderson Field fought off Japanese Zeros with nothing but grit and some 50 cal ammo. The Navy brass swore they'd never be caught short again. The Navy operates floating airfields that are expected to fight wars solo for weeks at a time. No resupply, no forward base. Just the carrier, its strike group, and whatever air wings they launched with. So the Navy needed its own fighters, strike aircraft, AEW platforms, tankers, trainers, helicopters, and electronic warfare jets, all hardened for carrier operations. That means reinforced landing gear, tailhooks, folding wings, anti-corrosion treatments, and the ability to survive hard traps and short takeoffs on moving decks. While the Air Force picked the F-15 Eagle for air superiority in open skies, the Navy got the F-14 Tomcat, a swing-wing interceptor capable of launching Phoenix missiles 100 miles out to vaporize incoming Soviet bombers. The Tomcat's AN/AWG-9 radar could track 24 targets simultaneously and engage up to 6 at once, because when your airfield floats, you don't want to wait until threats are overhead. The F-14's Phoenix missiles were so classified that when Iran's F-14s were delivered before the revolution, the missiles came with self-destruct mechanisms to prevent Soviet examination. Each Phoenix cost more than a Ferrari and weighed 1,000 pounds, basically a telephone pole with a rocket motor and the IQ of a gray alien. Navy aviation has always prioritized self-reliance, multi-role capability, and survivability under extreme conditions. Navy jets are built to survive salt water, slam into a boat, and still make it to the bar that night. That kind of over-engineering costs more than a titanium hip and a weekend in Cabo with your grandma. That's why platforms like the E-2 Hawkeye still fly, because they can see what radar stations on land never will. The Hawkeye's rotodome spins 6 times per minute and can detect cruise missiles skimming the waves at 250 miles. It's basically a flying air traffic control tower that happens to be armed and very interested in your business. Today, a single carrier air wing might carry 70 aircraft. Multiply that by the number of carriers plus training, logistics, surveillance, and shore-based units, and the numbers start stacking fast. The Marines take it a step further. They've never trusted anyone else to provide timely air support, and to be fair, they've got history on their side. During the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in 1950, Marine Corsairs flew close air support missions in negative 40-degree temperatures, often landing on frozen lakes to rearm and refuel. The pilots had to warm their engines with blowtorches and pray their hydraulics didn't freeze solid before they could get airborne again. So, marine aviation was built to do one thing: support Marines. That means fast, low, dirty, and preferably yesterday, the Corps has always leaned toward flexibility and vertical lift. They operated AV-8B Harriers before anyone else thought it was a good idea to land jets vertically. The Harrier could hover like a helicopter but hit targets like a fighter, though it had the glide ratio of a brick and the fuel efficiency of a muscle car with the air conditioning on. Today, they've moved to F-35Bs, because if you're going to land on short strips in mud or amphib decks, it helps to have a 5th-gen jet that doesn't care about runways. The F-35B's lift fan can generate 20,000 pounds of thrust straight down, essentially turning physics into a polite suggestion. They also fly KC-130s with gunship kits, AH-1Z Vipers, UH-1Y Venoms, and MV-22 Ospreys, blending rotorcraft agility with turboprop range. The Osprey can carry 24 combat-loaded Marines at 280 knots, twice as fast as any helicopter, and with 3 times the range. It's a flying toolkit for fighting in places with no infrastructure and no backup. And unlike the Navy, Marine pilots often double as ground officers, meaning they know exactly what kind of firepower a squad pinned down in a ditch needs. That doctrine hasn't changed since U-City. The divergence between the services also shows up in procurement. The Air Force invests in long-range stealth platforms, global ISR and standoff munitions. It sees war as a chessboard where information, altitude, and strike distance win the day. The B-2 Spirit can fly from Missouri to anywhere on Earth, drop 16 tons of precision-guided munitions, and be home for dinner without ever appearing on enemy radar. The Navy wants jets that can land on steel plates at 150 knots, shoot down threats before they reach the task force, and survive a saltwater environment that tries to kill electronics daily. Its focus is on layered defense and flexible forward-deployed offense. The FA-18 Super Hornet has to withstand 14.5 Gs during a carrier landing, enough force to turn a normal person into pudding. The Marines buy aircraft based on how quickly they can support a fire team under mortar fire and whether they can do it from a beach, jungle clearing, or half-melted tarmac. It's not just tactical, it's deeply personal. During Operation Desert Storm, Marine AV-8B Harriers flew from forward bases so close to the action that pilots could see muzzle flashes from Iraqi positions during their attack runs. That's why the Navy and Marines end up with different versions of the same airframes, or sometimes entirely different aircraft. It's why the Navy had the F-14 and EA-6B Prowler, while the Air Force never touched either. The EA-6B could jam enemy radar and communications across an entire battlefield, essentially turning modern armies blind and deaf from 30,000 feet. And it's also why the Navy has its own tanker plan, with the MQ-25 Stingray, while the Air Force is still trying to get KC-135s to stop leaking. The Stingray is unmanned, stealthy, and designed to extend carrier strike range by 500 miles. Basically, a flying gas station that doesn't need coffee breaks or bathroom stops. Put it all together, and you get a sprawling carrier-anchored web of fighter squadrons, helicopter detachments, patrol aircraft wings, and surveillance platforms. There are over 10 carrier air wings, dozens of Marine air groups, and constant deployments rotating through the Pacific, Middle East, and wherever else the water gets unfriendly. The P-8 Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft can hunt submarines across ocean basins, dropping sonobuoys and torpedoes with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. It's basically a flying submarine hunter that happens to be based on a Boeing 737. Because nothing says military efficiency like converting a passenger jet into an underwater death machine. And unlike most air forces, this one doesn't sit at home waiting for war. It lives forward. Sailors and Marines are flying combat missions, ISR patrols, freedom of navigation flights, and close air support right now, every day, without press releases or ticker tape. During Operation Inherent Resolve, Navy FA-18s launched from carriers in the Persian Gulf flew 10-hour missions against ISIS targets in Syria. A round trip that required multiple aerial refuelings and the kind of endurance that would make a long-haul trucker weep. That's how you end up with a number like 3,700 aircraft between just the Navy and Marine Corps. So far, everything we've talked about, fighters, strike aircraft, Early warning platforms, refuelers, trainers, that's just the Air Force, Navy, and Marines. But there's another major aviation arm in the US military that doesn't usually get lumped into these tallies: the Army. It doesn't operate fighters or bombers. What it does have is an enormous fleet of helicopters and support aircraft built around its mission of moving troops, providing fire support, and sustaining operations on the ground. From UH-60 Blackhawks and CH-47 Chinooks to AH-64 Apaches, the Army's aviation corps is its own ecosystem. These aircraft aren't just add-ons. They're fully integrated into ground maneuver doctrine, often playing a decisive role in combat. The Apache can carry up to 16 Hellfire missiles, 38 2.75-inch Hydra rockets, and has a 30mm chain gun that can carry up to 1,200 rounds of hate. Its longbow radar can detect, classify, and prioritize 256 targets simultaneously, then engage them in order of threat priority. During the opening hours of the 1991 Gulf War, Apache helicopters from the 101st Airborne flew deep into Iraq to destroy early warning radar sites, essentially cutting holes in Saddam's air defense network for follow-on strikes. They flew 240 miles into enemy territory at 25 feet above the ground, navigating by GPS and night vision. The CH-47 Chinook can carry 33 troops or 26,000 pounds of cargo, including artillery pieces and small vehicles. In Afghanistan, Chinooks regularly landed on mountain peaks at 10,000 feet elevation, where the thin air and rotor wash could turn a routine landing into a physics experiment. Additionally, Tier 1 and Tier 2 units from all branches often operate with a dedicated fleet of swoop-D helicopters and their pilots, known as the Special Operations Aviation Regiment. So even after adding up all the firepower in the sky from the Air Force, Navy, and Marines, there's still an entire third set of wings hovering just over the treetops, doing a completely different job, but no less essential. It's not just about how many aircraft a country fields, it's about how each one fits into the broader fight. This is Steel Mallard. Clear skies, sharp minds, no fluff. If you want more no-nonsense breakdowns on aviation in the battlefield, hit subscribe and stick around.